All right, welcome. Today, we are unpacking a source that turns modern history completely on its head. It claims that everything you know about the end of World War II might be wrong. So, let's just dive right in and explore this pretty radical alternative history.
So let me start by asking you this, just to get you thinking. What if it's all a lie? The source material we're digging into today puts forward this idea that the official story of an Allied victory was really just a massive psychological operation, a cover-up to hide a pretty devastating truth.
And here it is, the core claim, the big one, is that Japan actually achieved a decisive secret victory over the United States. They allegedly forced a surrender that was just never ever told to the public. I mean, that completely flips the script, right? So let's see how the source builds this incredible case.
So, how could this have even happened? How was this unbelievable victory supposedly won? Well, according to this source, it wasn't about a traditional invasion. It was all about a secret weapon, a piece of technology that was an absolute game changer that the Allies just had no answer for.
Okay, get this. The source breaks down this attack in fascinating detail. We're talking about what it calls the world's very first smart weapons. These were radio-controlled drones, basically flying bombs, guided with pinpoint accuracy by pilots in other planes and even by crews on submarines. The result? A swift and totally devastating blow. Every single drone, it claims, hit its target, leaving the U.S. Navy with a horrifying choice: surrender right now or watch your entire fleet be wiped off the map.
Okay, but wait a minute. The first thing you're probably thinking is, what about the atomic bombs? Hiroshima and Nagasaki are like the defining events that ended the war. So if the US was already defeated, how on earth does this source explain away the nukes?
And this is where things get really wild. On one hand, you have the official history we all know. On the other, this source says, nope, that destruction was just from regular old firebombing. And that famous mushroom cloud footage? A total fake, it alleges. But the biggest claim, the most fundamental one, is that human beings can't even split an atom. The source says the very idea of nuclear weapons was the real psychological operation.
So if Japan won the war back in 1945, what happened next? Well, according to this source, that military victory was just Phase 1. Phase 2 was a decades-long, super quiet, and kind of sinister takeover of the United States from the inside.
And this timeline lays out the whole alleged strategy. It starts with that secret surrender in 45, then a deep infiltration of American leadership. Fast forward to the 80s, and you get this huge cultural invasion, led by Japanese electronics. By the 90s, the source argues the media gets weaponized to push what it calls mediocrity. And that all leads us to today, which it describes as nothing less than open biological and technological warfare.
And this takeover wasn't just cultural, it was economic. The source claims that control was locked in by buying up huge American industries, like U.S. Steel, and then by becoming the main owner of America's debt. On a smaller scale, it points to dollar stores, saying they're designed to sell defective stuff to intentionally lower everyone's standard of living. It even claims that British insurance companies were used as a backdoor to force Japanese-made, high-intensity headlights onto American cars as part of this broader strategy of control.
All right, now we get to the next battleground in this supposed silent war: culture. This is where the source argues that some of the most famous pieces of entertainment from the past few decades weren't just for fun. They were carefully crafted propaganda weapons.
$1.27 billion. In 2024, the source highlights this absolutely staggering number. It's what Sony, a Japanese corporation, paid for one band's music catalog. But why? Why so much money for just one band?
Well, the source says the answer is hidden in plain sight, right in this lyric. It suggests this wasn't just a business deal, it was a trophy. By owning the song "We Are the Champions," was the corporation basically taking a victory lap in public, declaring their global dominance?
And the source claims this goes way beyond music. For kids, you've got Nintendo and Pokemon, allegedly designed to distract them from serious subjects like engineering. For adults, movies like The Karate Kid, a story where an old Japanese master can easily beat strong young Americans. The theory even gets into things like the USA Today logo, calling it a subtle version of the Japanese flag. And films like RoboCop 3 and Gung Ho were supposedly used to get people used to the ideas of robotic control and Japanese industrial superiority.
And that brings us to the final section, what the source calls the end game. This is the final chapter of the alleged occupation, and it moves past economics and culture and into direct biological and social warfare designed to permanently neutralize the American people.
According to the source, the weapons are hiding in plain sight. Those super bright LED headlights? Not an accident, they're meant to damage your eyes. Vaporizers, a delivery system for lead. Cell phones, the #1 tool for manipulating your mind. And then there's the claim that the tap water itself is being intentionally drugged with pharmaceuticals to create an estrogenic effect on the population.
So what's the goal of all this? The source calls it a deep population agenda. Basically, a military strategy to make sure America can never field an army ever again. It claims that social agendas in schools are there to promote sterilization, that abortion clinics are a front for harvesting biological materials, and that all of this has pushed the birth rate down to a level where the population can't sustain itself.
And the philosophy behind all of this, the source claims, can be summed up in this one pretty brutal phrase. It's presented as the conqueror's mindset. The winner takes everything, and the loser, well, the loser isn't even seen as a person anymore. They're just a resource to be used up.
And that brings us to this truly chilling metaphor. This is supposedly how the occupiers see the United States, not as a country to be governed, but as a meat locker, just a passive inventory of biological resources, from stem cells to organs, all there to be harvested to benefit the empire.
And so we end right back where we started, with a question. The source we've unpacked today flips history on its head. And it leaves us with this final thought. In a world of sophisticated psyops and quiet control, if you were being taken over silently, how would you even know you'd lost? It really makes you think about what victory and defeat actually look like today.